Good morning, brethren. Welcome to the African Weekly Talk. Today is June 19, 2022, which also happens to be Father's Day. So let me use this opportunity to wish you guys fathers, happy Father's Day. Enjoy your day and wish you guys all the best. Now, today is also June 19th. June 19th is also the Independence Day for African Americans in America. Because going back to the history of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, that freed slaves. There were some states in America, especially in the South, where the slaves didn't know about the Emancipation Proclamation until 1865. That is 2 years later. That is when the Union troops got to Texas and informed the slaves at that time that they have been freed through the Emancipation Proclamation. So Emancipation Proclamation was 1863. 2 years later, the citizens, the slaves in Galveston, Texas, also became free on June 19th, 1865. So that is why June 19th, which is now called Juneteenth, is the Independence Day of African American in America. Because it was that day that every slave in America became free. Now, it is very interesting that it took 2 years. There are some speculations. Some people say that they wanted to give the slave owners in Texas opportunity to, use the free labor for a while. But I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I think, back then things were different. It's not like today that information travels quickly. So, I mean, I think it took that time because of maybe like the Union soldiers couldn't get the message across as quickly as possible, and eventually they got there and the people became free, just like every other or every person in slavery at the time. Now, today's program, I want to talk not just about June 19th. June 19th was our Independence Day. It's our Independence Day, which is great for every African American. But there's also something that a friend of mine who happens to be an African American, this is the guy, we go back, that brought to my attention some few days ago. He had sent me, a clip of a YouTube video about an issue regards to dreadlocks of students in Ghana who were denied the right to enroll in the school in Ghana because of their dreadlocks, the hairstyle. So when he sent me that clip and he called me after that, and I said, oh, this is old news. I mean, this thing was last year, 2021. And I also said, this thing had happened in Kenya, in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, South Africa, it goes all over, but it's very, very unfortunate, and even in Jamaica, So, but it's very, very unfortunate that in 2021, this issue keeps cropping up, and the saddest of it all is that it's happening in Africa. And this dude was a very good friend of mine. I mean, we go back, when, we used to be members, go to meetings for NAACP in the Montgomery County area. So he was really, really, taken aback by the YouTube video. And he was very disappointed because of the fact that if any place in Africa, the last place he thought would be Ghana. And his reasoning was that, 2019, the government of Ghana was telling African Americans, Africans in the diaspora to come back home, to celebrate the 400 years of the slavery, and a lot of African Americans, consider Ghana like home and other parts of Africa. So he was very, very disappointed in that sense. That, here you have a country that is inviting us to come back. And at the same time, this country is going back to the same old colonial legacy of slavery, the colonial legacy of inferiority, and the slavery legacy of inferiority towards the African man and woman. So he was very, very, upset and very, very disappointed, because his point was that how can a country like Ghana, even in this modern age, in the 21st century, a country like Ghana will have an institution, one of the greatest institutions in Ghana, Achimota School, have a policy where an African child will be denied enrollment because of their natural hair, which happens to be dreadlocks. So, like I told him, this was 2021, and the case eventually went to the to the High Court in Ghana, and it was settled. But I also have to explain to him that when this thing happened, apparently, basically what happened was, I'm going to be brief on this issue. These students, I think there were 3 students, had been admitted through the process because of their exams and their qualifications. So when the time came for these students to be enrolled, they showed up in the school, and that is when the school realized that they had dreadlocks. So they were told they could not be admitted into the school because of their dreadlocks. So these boys were denied the right to enroll into a public school. This school I'm talking about, the Achimota School, is a public school. This is not even a private entity, a private school. This is a public school funded by the people of Ghana from the very beginning, and up to these days still get funds from the Ministry of Education of Ghana. So we are not even talking about a private institution. So these kids were denied. So eventually, the parents, and through the good work of some individuals, lawyers, who took up the case to file a court case against the school. First, they made a complaint to the Ghana Education Service. And from what I heard, the education services asked the school and the parents to negotiate to come on a good term so that this case can be enrolled. And then the school decided that they weren't going to do that. So the parents now have to seek this enrollment through the legal system. So they filed a lawsuit. Now, even my question to the education service at that time when I heard this issue was, first of all, the education service even didn't have to tell the school to work it out with the parents or the students on this issue. It shouldn't even have been the case. Because this should have been a no situation right from the beginning, the get-go. The education service should have just told the school that, look, you have no right to deny any child the right to education just because of the way they look or because of their natural given hair by their creator. period. And in that sense, you either have one thing to do. Either you enroll these students, or we are going to get your accreditation from as an institution in Ghana. Period. I don't care what kind of school it is. This is what the education service should have done right from the beginning. Right from the beginning, they didn't even have to tell them to try to work it out or anything. No. They should have gone straight to tell them that, look, either you enroll these students, or we are going to take your accreditation as an institution, as a high school institution in Ghana. Period. I don't care whether it was a school founded in 1908 or it was founded by great people like Kwegri Agri or Kwame Nkrumah attended it or not. Because the reason being that this incident would have sent a strong message to other institutions in Ghana. And that would have been very, very, very bold by the education services to do. To get it out to the other institutions that, look, we are not going to tolerate any form of discrimination in this country. We are not going to tolerate any form, especially being Africans and being blacks. Africans born and bred in a country, and you are going to deny a child the right to go to school just because you disagree of the way his or her natural hair has grown, or he decides to maintain his or her natural hair. Are you kidding me? And this happens in Ghana. I mean, come on. This is ridiculous. So I told my friend, I understand why I'd be angry. Because myself, when I first heard about this, I was very, very angry about it. I was very, very angry because I looked at this great school, Achimota School, which was pretty much founded by, James Kwegri Agri. And the guy, Fraser, that he was then one of the British, people that the British had sent to Ghana, Gold Coast at that time. And then attended by great people. Kwame Nkrumah went to school at Achimota. I mean, and you look at people like Kwegri Agri, and you look at people like Nkrumah. These are people who are Pan-Africans. These are people where Africa is embedded in their bloodstream, period. I mean, Kwame Nkrumah, there's nobody you can say is more African than Kwame Nkrumah or Kwegri Agri. I mean, these are the people we are talking about. And for a school that these people were part of, in 50 years later, to deny a child, an African child, the right to go to school is very, very unfortunate. But so anyway, eventually, the case went to court, and the High Court ruled in favor of the case. So they have to be enrolled into the school. But the saddest of it all is that even the Ghana, I think there was a Ghana Schools Association or something like about, the Teachers Association or something. All these institutions associated with education in Ghana pretty much were siding with the school. And the PTA, the Parent Teacher Association of Achimota, sent out a letter public. They made a letter public to the whole world, pretty much, especially the people of Ghana. The reason why they think those kids should not be admitted, because they were talking about they want to maintain the old traditions of the Achimota school. And my question is, hold on. What are the old traditions of the Achimota school? This school was founded in the 1924 under colonization. Now you telling me you want to maintain traditions that were part of the colonial legacy? Are you kidding me? I mean, so I couldn't understand these people. And most of these people, these same people who happen to be members of the PTA and these associations in Ghana, these are the so-called people who you would think that have become educated and enlightened enough to understand the history of colonialism and the impact that it has had on Africa. But there's always one thing that I always say. You see, when somebody tells you he's educated, ask him or her, what kind of education did you get? Because you can be educated. That doesn't mean you are enlightened. You can be educated and have the wrong education. Because these are the very people, if you go to their background, they will tell you their doctorate here, their PhD here, and all that nonsense. And somehow couldn't come to the realization that even the case that they were making against these kids wasn't going to hold any water. The case wasn't going to hold any water, period. I mean, why in the world, in this modern world, are you going to make a case that you're going to deny a child the right to school because of the hairdo or the hairstyle? And secondly, I mean, most of these schools and most of these countries, especially these African countries, in Ghana in particular, they talk about their Christian values and all of that stuff. Now, go read the Bible yourself. The Nazarene in the Bible were supposed to leave their hair to grow, which turns into locks. So even when you go through the biblical route, it tells you exactly that this is something that is even part of the African roots that goes back into the Bible. That is even in the Bible, than the Nazarenes. So if you want to talk about preserving something that is natural, there's nothing more preserving than having a child wear his or her natural hair, God-given natural hair, the way that it's supposed to be worn, which is locks. If you don't like it, fine, that's your choice. But don't deny a child the right to education just because you don't like the way their hair is. And then the question I ask is, so you don't want that African child who has a natural hair to be enrolled in your school, but you have an European child who also have a straight long hair access to your schools. But then tell the African children that somehow you want them to have their hair cut and to be short. And that is the old colonial mindset that you want to maintain. You still want to maintain the old racist, bigotry colonial mindset in the 1920s, 40s, all the way through independence, and you still want to maintain that in your schools in 21st century in this world. You guys must be crazy. You guys are a bunch of ignorant, I don't know what else to say. Are you kidding me? And that is what I told my friend. I mean, my African-American friend was so disappointed. He said, George, I can't see myself visiting that country. I said, man, look, you can go and visit. I mean, you can disagree with them, but don't hold this one instance, which I don't want anybody. But even though it portrays, Ghana in a very bad, because he did. Especially a lot of people didn't expect a country like Ghana to have a school like Achimota use that old colonial mindset, that old legacy of colonization on the African people in Africa. We are not talking about this happening even in Europe or Asia or somewhere outside of Africa. In our own backyard, we are being told that you are not going to be allowed to go enroll in a school because of your dreadlocks in your own backyard. Meanwhile, we've been in America, we've been in Europe, we've been in all over this world fighting for the rights of Africans to be able to have a peaceful, happy life just like every other citizen of the world. And then in our own backyard, our children, who happens to be dreadlock children, are being denied the right to education. They should be ashamed of themselves. Kwame Nkrumah should be kicking himself in his grave. Kwame Nkrumah and Kwegri Agri, they should be kicking themselves in their graves. Kwegri Agri is buried in North Carolina. May his soul rest in peace. There's one of the most eloquent speakers in the 20th century is Kwegri Agri. He was once quoted saying that if you educate a man, you have educated an individual. If you educate a woman, you have educated a nation. That was Kwegri Agri. And Kwame Nkrumah is known as, I don't know any Pan-Africanist more than Kwame Nkrumah, But you see, for you to understand some of these things, you also have to understand the history of sometimes the people that run things in these places. Because I don't know the background of the PTA Association in Ghana. I don't know the headmaster's background. But if some of these people who run these institutions maybe have been outside, maybe have lived outside and assimilated into the societies outside, like Kwame Nkrumah did, like Kwegri Agri did, maybe their level of education and their enlightenment will be different in looking at issues, especially when it comes to race in Africa. Because race in Africa has been an issue that has been fought all over the world by African Americans in America, Africans in Europe, Africans all over. And we have always fought and argued on these cases because of the history of racism and the history of slavery. Now, talking about this incident, this wasn't the first time that this same issue cropped up. We had an incident that happened in Zimbabwe. We had an issue that also happened in South Africa. We had an issue that also happened in it also happened in Malawi. So, and Kenya. And in Kenya, it was also by a student. In Kenya's case, I think it was 2019. Ghana's case was 2021. And then in Kenya, it was also by a student. And in all these cases, the Supreme Court of Kenya also ruled in favor of the student. Same way with Malawi. As a matter of fact, the Malawi case, even the Supreme Court made sure that the students that was denied the education had to be homes and schooled. They have to make sure that they go back and teach that child privately to catch up with the other fellow students. So you had a case in Zimbabwe in 2007. You had a case in Kenya 2019. You had a case in Malawi 2020. And then 2021, you have a case in Ghana. Now, hold on. And all these countries are what? In Africa. These are Africans. And these are same Africans making a case against the hairdo of a child being enrolled into a school. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. It's so sad. It's so sad that we up in the 21st century as Africans, we don't have anything better to be talking about developing our countries, about building better infrastructures to put us in a position to compete with the outside world. But rather, we're going to hold back and still litigate some old colonial legacies that did not do any good to Africa. And that is where we are going to put our emphasis on denying our own children, because of the hairstyle, the right to education in our systems. You know what? It is a shame. It is a shame. It is very, very unfortunate that we have to be in a position in this modern day, 21st century, still be talking about what kind of hair an African child should have before they will be enrolled into a school system. This thing will never happen in America because it's past dead. It's a dead issue because these issues, look, this goes back to, like I said, the legacy of colonialism. Okay, when the Europeans used these measures to deny the Africans the right to be themselves. Okay, and it wasn't just in Africa. In America, it was done here too. America, it was the same. So that is why it's so sad for me to, and even for my friend, the African American friend, because he was also relating this to back in America during Jim Crow era, where Africans were denied the right to even to work in certain places because of their braids or their locks. And in all those cases, eventually, most states pass laws, and now it's against the law to do that in America. And it's been like this in America for over 40, 50 years now. Once in a while, it crops up, but at the end of the day, when it gets to the court, you will lose the case. So if you are not a very stupid institution, you're not even going to touch that issue because you're not going to win that issue. You're not going to win an issue that involves the natural being, something given to that person or persons by their creator, because your hair is part of you. Your hair is part of your heritage. Your hair is part of who you are as a human being. You don't have to shave your hair. You don't have to cut your hair. You have to do anything to your hair if you choose not to. And you should not be denied anything just because you want to look a certain way, because that is how naturally God created you. It's that simple. And you are not going to win any case anywhere on earth on this issue. But anyway, the saddest of it all is because we are still talking about this stuff in Africa in the 21st century when it shouldn't be. Now, talking about the issue of hair, it brings back something that I've always wanted to address when it comes to this issue of hair. The African woman is the most beautiful woman on earth. The African woman also happens to be the first human, according to scientific history proof, was to be on earth. The modern human being, Homo sapiens sapien, human being, the modern human being today that we see. The only place that they have found skulls that goes back thousands and thousands of years happen to be in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, all in the eastern part, in Somalia, all in the eastern part of Africa. And the first one that was found, I think, in the mid-50s, and then later made to the world public in the early 70s, was the one Lucy, which was, I think, about 3 or 4 foot woman called Lucy, which pretty much is considered the mother of it all. And that is what you are. You are the beacon of life, the black woman. There's no woman on earth more beautiful than the black woman. And the black woman symbolizes everything that God gave humans on earth. The image, like they say in the Bible, you are made in the image of the Almighty, and that is what the black woman is. Now, why in the world on earth that now we have a situation where the black woman wants to change their beautiful makeup given by God to look like the European woman in terms of hair? Because I'm talking about this because of the issue of hair. And the reason I'm saying this is because if you look at the black woman, when you talk about issue of hair, you talk about braids, you talk about locks. All this goes back to ancient Egypt. And in ancient Egypt, that is the only place that we know today that have been found in some of the tombs of the ancient pharaohs in Egypt, as well as some in Nubia, Sudan, where some of the artwork, some of the artifacts that are found with braids by the people there, which pretty much symbolizes it's just like locks. Now, there's also an issue where some people say that, oh, they also have it in, what do you call it, in some Indian, the people of the shaman, or also called the sadhus in India. But theirs is different. Because going back in Africa, you have a situation where in around what we call it today, Nigeria today, where the people there, thousands of 500, 800, 600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, wore locks, dreadlocks. Okay? And if you're talking about even the modern day locks that exist right now, that you see that everybody is doing it, then you have to go to the, the Kikuyu people of Kenya. The Kikuyu people of Kenya were the ones who pretty much made the dreadlocks that you see today popular. Because the guy, what's the guy's name? The guy who founded Rastafarian, his name is Leonard Howell, a Jamaican. He was so proud when he found out that the Kikuyu people who came up with the organization called the Mau Mau, the rebellious organization against the British colonization of Africa, of Kenya. They were the ones who pretty much helped Kenya to become independent. Jomo Kenyatta and the people rest would never have had Kenya to become independent if it wasn't for the Mau Mau people. It was the Mau Mau people. As a matter of fact, the Mau Mau people created so much problem for the British that they had to pretty much declare war on them, thereby using other other military soldiers from other colonies, especially Uganda, to go to Kenya to help them to quell the Mau Mau uprising against the British rule. What do you call the guy's name? I think Idi Amin even also was part of one of the soldiers who went to fight against the fellow Africans, the Mau Mau people. When he was under the British, Uganda was under the British colony, was a British colony. So the history of locks, dreadlocks, modern day dreadlocks, which the Rastafarians used as part of their religion, goes back to those people, the Mau Mau. That is what I know. And the modern day history of the Rastafarian came about in terms of the hair, had to do with the Mau Mau people. You know, because this is in his own words, Leonard Howell, one of the founders, if he's not the founding father of Rastafarianism. Some people will say Marcus Garvey pretty much gave the speeches, the inspiration for it, but Leonard Howell was the founder of the Rastafarianism, of what we call Rastafarian today. That is, I'm not talking about the Rastafari part, which is related to what do you call it, Haile Selassie. That's not what I'm talking about in terms of the hair. Then that one you can relate it to the Mau Mau people of Kenya. Now, like I said, talking about the hair, let me piggyback back onto the black woman, like I said about the black woman. The black woman is the most beautiful woman created by God. And the black woman should no way on earth try to wear this straight hair to look like European or Asian because they have straight hair. Because the beauty of the black woman is more than just having a straight hair. The facial skull, the body makeup of the black woman is a gift that God gave to the first a human. Because we are the black woman is the first pretty much human that God created. You know, unless somebody can prove something otherwise, because at the end of the day, the oldest skull that has been found in those Lucy was a woman. You know? So the African woman should be very proud of themselves to wear their natural hair. Wear your natural hair, beautiful queens. I mean, the hair of the African woman is part of her beauty. The hair of the Asians, the hair of the Caucasians, that's their part of their beauty. But outside of hair and everything else, there's nothing even close to the African woman. You know, I was so proud of this lady who won the 2019 the world beauty pageant. The name is Zuzibini Tunji. She's a South African. I've read a little bit about her when she won it. I was so proud of that woman because what she said was that when she decided to contest and she had always started wearing her hair naturally, and there were people who started questioning if, you know, she was going to change her hairstyle, and she insisted that, look, this is who I am, and I'm going to keep with it. I'm going to go with it like it is. And you know what? She went with it. That's a very beautiful woman. I mean, you look at that woman standing there. There was nobody close. And she went with her natural hair. That is what the Black Queen is all about. That is what a Black Queen, that's the Black Queen. You look at the totality of the woman standing there. And there was no two ways. And she won that beauty pageant. She didn't have to put on anything. She didn't have to do any makeup. So she didn't have to have any long hair to look like European or anything. She just went with her natural African hair. But you know what? If you are beautiful, you are beautiful. Hair ain't nothing. It doesn't mean a damn thing whether you have a straight hair or you have this or that. If you are not beautiful, you are not beautiful. But because she is beautiful, she won that contest. But you know what? What gets me most is that now I'm going to get into the issue of prominent people like Michelle Obama. I see Michelle Obama. I went to see Michelle Obama when Barack Obama was running to become president. This was before he became president. This was around 2003, 2004 when he was running. And she did a fundraiser. She was in Bethesda, BCC, Bethesda High School. So I went down there to watch Michelle Obama. I admire that woman so much. She's a beautiful woman, you know, sophisticated, very beautiful, pure African woman. But there's one thing I disagreed with her, which is I've never seen her wear braids. And I was like, this woman is beautiful. Why wouldn't she have a natural braids or have a natural hair? You know, I mean, I think she has a natural hair on, but I mean, if she doesn't perm it and she have a natural cut or have her braids on to look more like a Black woman. Because you know why I'm saying this? I'm saying this because you see people like Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, Janet Jackson. These people are role models for African American young women growing up because they look at them out to these women, powerful women. And for us as African American and African people to get that inferiority complex, the idea that somehow we have to look close to the European to be accepted in society. We are in a world right now that I think we as African people, as Black people, have to start with this new generation. Let's get that nonsense out of our little kids growing up. And you know what? Now I see a lot of the young, women, this young generation, 20, 25, 30, wearing their natural, what they call it, curly hair, without straightening it or without wearing wigs. I see them all the time. And I'm very, very proud of that. And that is how it has to be. And people like Oprah Winfrey and what do you call it? And Michelle Obama, Beyonce, and Janet Jackson, and all these role models, they should also start doing this, because this is very important, because it helps elevate the self-esteem of these African beautiful queens. It helps raises their self-esteem, because remember, we are the only unique race on earth. That is what we have to remember. We are the only unique race on earth. All the other races, they have straight hair. Fine. We are the only ones who have curly hair. And we have curly hair because we're the first ones. And we're the first ones to be on earth. The African was on earth thousands and thousands of years before the European or the Asian came onto earth. So there's no accident. That is why we have a curly hair and everybody else have a straight hair. So let's be proud of what we have. And let's tell that to our children. Let's let our children be proud of themselves. They don't have to have these wigs from China, Brazil, India, and all that nonsense. No, let's educate them. I mean, I go to Africa a lot. I go to Africa sometimes, and you see these women. You go to the stores, and what you see is these wigs from Asia, from China, from India, from Brazil. No, I mean, you have the right to wear straight hair if you want to. That's okay. That's your choice. But you know what? Let's also make our children proud to be themselves. To be themselves, to know that, look, my natural hair is what God gave me, and I'm beautiful because of that. Because guess what? You know what? That's the white woman, the Asian woman, the what do you call it? Other Indian woman have the same body structure like the black woman? Heck no, they don't. You know why? Because they are not African. They are not blacks. And God did not give them that. God gave them straight hair. Can't let them have it. But you know what? God gave you the black woman, the beauty score of your face, your beautiful hair texture, your body, your skin tone, your melanin. All that thing was given to you by God. Let's use it. Let's show how proud and happy and beautiful we are. And let's thank God every day we walk out of the door, every day that we wake up from our beds. Because you know what? Other races will die to have what we have. So people like Michelle Obama, Beyonce, and Janet Jackson, and Oprah Winfrey, all these powerful black women, please. I mean, you don't have to, but it will be a good sign if you people will also advertise the natural beauty, which is your hair, the braids, which is part of our natural hairdo, for our kids to use that to build their self-esteem so that they don't have to sit somewhere for somebody to tell them they're ugly just because they don't have a straight hair. No, it's about time we do away with all this nonsense. And let's start instilling this in our children. Remember, there's a saying that charity begins at home. Because if we start teaching the young kids coming up today, in about 30, 40 years, they don't have to deal with this nonsense about being inferior because you don't have a straight hair. Because they've used this against us for too long. I remember in the 50s or 60s when you had musicians like James Brown. Men have to perm their hair. These guys have to perm their hair, to straighten their hair, just to look like the European. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? And then later, same James Brown came up with a song. Yes, I'm proud to be black. Yes, black power. Yes, so James Brown, a guy who had permed hair, started playing songs like "Say It Loud, I'm Black and Proud." Say it loud, I'm black and proud. All this stuff started happening in the 60s at the backdrop of Uniae, Marcus Garvey's movement, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, So now you had the African Americans standing up to be who they are. And with this backdrop of Uniae, United Negro Association, and the civil rights movement, it made America unsettled pretty much, because it unsettled the FBI. So now you had the FBI, which had what they call it, surveillances on even Martin Luther King, you know, and which is kind of strange today, because looking at who Martin Luther King is and how he's considered today, but back then he wasn't considered that way. Okay, let's be clear. Martin Luther King was not considered the way he's considered today in American history. Okay, back then they thought he was a radical. You know, it wasn't just Malcolm X. So basically now you have this Afrocentric movement within the African American communities, where you had the Afro hair, we had the dashikis, you know, on student campuses all across the country. I mean, this was in the 60s. So you had these young students, you know, African Americans now proudly wearing their natural hair, which is the Afro, you know. And then you had, what do you call it, the Black Panther Party, you know, with one of their key founders, Stokely Carmichael. You know, you had all these people now standing up and showing how proud they are to be Africans, you know, African Americans anyway. But so this unsettled the American institutions, especially the FBI and the general American population, because now they are seeing how the Black American is now standing up to his heritage or her heritage, you know, being proud of who they are, wearing their dakishis, wearing their Afro hair. Don't have to be like, you know, doing things to make them think that, you know, they have to be like white in the society for them to be respected and all that stuff. So you started seeing this rebellious act in the cultural system of America, especially within the Black communities, you know, at the backdrop of the Black Panther Party. Remember, the Black Panther Party, one of the key founders is Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael, who happens to also be married to Miriam Makeba, a South African woman. You know, so you had all this movement going on. You know, so you started seeing the movement changing the perception of Black people about themselves. You know, because especially Say It Loud, I'm Black, I'm Proud became the mantra of the day that time. You know, you see people say it loud, I'm Black, I'm proud. You know, and that is how it's supposed to be. That is how it's supposed to be. You know, I mean, so this movement pretty much also gave rise to the civil rights in a way, one way or the other. Because even though the civil rights was there, but remember, there's also Malcolm X. Malcolm X, who stood up and gave a very powerful speech. Malcolm X gave one of the most powerful speeches you can ever hear. I mean, that's a very eloquent speaker, Malcolm X. There's no two ways about that man. May he so rest in peace. Remember, when he made that speech, and he stated clearly, he said, who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate your hair? Who taught you to hate who you are? Who taught you to hate your nose? Who taught you to hate your lips? You know, so he understood that the system had brainwashed the African American in America. You know, indoctrinated the African American for them to hate, not to like themselves. So the only way they saw themselves to be somebody, the only way they saw themselves to be beautiful is to tilt towards the white Eurocentric way, thereby trying to make their hair straight. You know what I'm saying? Trying to make their hair straight. I mean, trying to lighten their skin. I mean, and all that nonsense. You know, so when the people started hearing these movements, you know, Malcolm X, Uniae, Marcus Garvey's organization, the what they call the NAACP. You know, you heard it in the music. You know, so now it started to change. It started to change gradually how the African American saw him or herself in American culture. You know, and that was something that was very, very positive, very, very good for the African Americans. You know, But let's not also forget that during this civil rights era, the Uniae, which is Marcus Garvey's movement, at that time, as a matter of fact, was the biggest black organization in America. I know a lot of people will be surprised. NAACP was no match to the Uniae because Marcus Garvey started preaching about being African, being proud of who you are, about the history of African civilization, about who, as African people, the Black American is. So, and a lot of Black Americans from the South all the way to the North started gravitating towards Marcus Garvey's Uniae. So at some point in America, the Uniae had more membership than any Black organization in America. No wonder, if you know the history of how Marcus Garvey was deported back to his country, eventually went to England and back to his country and died. No wonder he was deported, because Marcus Garvey was seen as a threat by the US government. He wasn't violent. He didn't organize any violence against the American government or American people. All Marcus Garvey was preaching why Black Americans have to be self-dependent and not rely on the American system, the government, to change things for them. This is all Marcus Garvey was preaching. Why Blacks have to be proud and talk about the Black Star Line, the movement of Blacks who want to go to Africa and resettle in Africa. And these were all positives. Positive things that Marcus Garvey was talking about. Being responsible, being able to stand up to who you are as a person, your history, your civilizations. All these things were things that Marcus Garvey's organization was preaching to the people. And you know what? And the people gravitated towards it. Because you know what? They loved it. But at the backdrop of all of this was the FBI, who was also monitoring these things. They were monitoring these things not because they thought it was violent, but they were monitoring this because they realized that, look, when you speak about self-independent, being independent without being going to the government for things, then the FBI and these people realize that these things are making the empowerment, creating an empowerment process for the Black American in America. You know, and the last thing they wanted was Black empowerment, because Black economic empowerment becomes something else to them. Because when you're economic empowered, then that economic empowerment gives you a lot of leverage in so many areas in the economy of the country that you are in. And they knew all of this. So they wanted to make sure that all these things were going to be stopped one way or the other. So eventually, they had to get rid of Marcus Garvey. They found a way. He was charged with mail fraud, you know, because he had sent mail to letters for contribution towards the organization, whatever, and they used that. And eventually was sent to jail. And then later he was granted a pardon by the president. I've forgotten the name of the president. And then he was deported out of the country. So, looking back, in the 60s was when the Black American started gravitating towards the Afro-African way. You know, I mean, just imagine being a slave in a system that you have the child being cut off from the parents. These children don't know anything. They don't know who their parents are. They don't know where they're from. I mean, so sometimes you have to understand the mindset when it comes to how the Black American felt in America. You know, because you have situations where most of these slaves had no clue. A lot of them even didn't know that their ancestry was from Africa. And they wouldn't know. Because the purpose of holding people down in the slavery era was to cut them off, right, as children. So the child is being raised in a society based on the white European narrative. You know, so there was no knowledge of anything about themselves other than what they are being told by the white European narrative. So you have all these things cropping up in America, and you look at the colonies, there wasn't anything different. It wasn't that different in the colonies. They were the same in the colonies as well, because they had the same objective, was to hold the Africans down, either in their colonial, in their colonies or in America. Remember, America did not really colonize any country, but the playbook of the European of holding the African in a certain position to control them was played by all of them. It didn't have to be England, Germany, France, Rome, Spain, or anything else. It was a playbook played by all of them. Because if you know the history of how Africa became, colonized, officially colonized, then go back to 1884, the Berlin Conference, called by Bismarck, and with people like Leopold. One of the most evil human beings. We talk about Hitler, but nobody talks about Leopold, King Leopold of Belgium. We talk about Hitler, but nobody talks about Leopold. But you know why? Because what Leopold did, he killed more people than Hitler did. And this Leopold man was the most evil human being that ever lived to me in the 19th century. There's no doubt about it. I will go and read the history of Congo. How children, mothers, fathers were killed, slaughtered, just because they couldn't produce a certain quantity of goods that was expected of them. Just go read the history under Leopold. But nobody talks about Leopold today. Every time you hear about some bad European rulers, you talk about Mussolini and you talk about Hitler. But King Leopold of Belgium. So basically, the Berlin Conference was called by these Europeans who were then in Africa, fighting among themselves over the African continent, on the African continent. And they called that conference to stop the fighting and break up Africa like what we see today in Africa. Remember, the Europeans have been in Africa at that time, had been in Africa from the first European world, the Portuguese, I'm talking about the modern European. When I'm talking about these things, I always want to break them into different parts, because when I talk about the modern European coming to Africa, now I should talk about the 16th century, around the 1500s, 1400s, 1500s, when the Portuguese first set foot off the coast of Senegal, an island down there, and then, because I'm not going to talk about ancient Greece, when they came to Egypt, and Nubia and all those were ancient. So I'm not going to talk about them. Now I'm talking about this modern one, 500, 600 years stuff. That's basic modern history, So anyway, so they were there until they came up with the Berlin Conference about 300 years later. Because they were trading basically, and then they had a slave trade. Initially, they were trading on gold, salt, because the Portuguese themselves said it. The first time they came to Africa, they came out to Africa for in search of gold, and the other Europeans also followed. But anyway, and then so they were pretty much trading with the Africans. There was no ill feelings or anything. It was basically trade, and then officially, when the Berlin Conference was called in 1884. It was the Berlin Conference that officially carved up Africa into what Africa is today. That was when they agreed that whoever takes authority, a certain percentage of a territory, that territory belongs to that person, that country. So Africa basically was carved like we see today, based on the 1884 Berlin Conference. So from the 1884 up to the 1960s, that's when Africa became independent. If you look at it, the damage to Africans had already been done. Prior to the Berlin Conference. But it was the Berlin Conference that pretty much established the colonies. So now you have these countries, England, France, Belgium, Germany, all of them now holding these countries, and now they can do whatever they want and set their policies and how they are going to govern these places. So, talking about the issue of hair again, if you look at the system that was going on in America at that time, remember at that time, America also had the situation of segregation also, which was legal at that time in America. So you had this issue of segregation in America at that time, which was pretty much a copy of what was going on in South Africa. Because South Africa and America at that time, there was no difference. All right? There was no difference between South Africa and America because the same segregation laws that was in America was pretty much the same in South Africa. Okay? Apartheid was in South Africa as well as in America. All right? So let's not get things twisted. Sometimes we forget the history of a lot of things that have happened in America as well as in correlation with what the imperial colonies were doing in their colonies. Okay? So you had this situation going on both in Africa as well in America and other parts of the world, in the Caribbean and all of this. So you've had all these situations cropping up all the time with regards to how the blacks in Africa, the Caribbean, and America were being treated based on their features. So it came to a point in this country where a person with the locks was a taboo. Because the locks pretty much symbolizes self-pride in a black American or the black person. And in the American society and most Western society at the time, the only thing they wanted to see in their society was Eurocentric form of culture. So anything that shows a black pride, especially in America at the time, showed self-awareness by a black person. So the culture in America at that time was that if they saw a black man with locks, dashiki, showing a symbol or sign of anything relating to Africa, that makes that black man too enlightened or self-awareness man. And when you have a person who you consider to be self-awareness of himself or of his history, then psychologically, that person doesn't fall for your brainwash or your indoctrination. So this is what pretty much Marcus Garvey was doing. And then you had Malcolm X coming. And Malcolm X also was talking about these things. And then asking them, who told you to hate yourself? You were brainwashed. You were indoctrinated to believe that you are not good. And we have to cut that out. This was Malcolm X. When he gave that speech, that was one of the most powerful speeches Malcolm X ever gave, was that. And then you had also the Black Panther Party coming in. So all these things in the 60s made the FBI very unsettled with the way things were moving in terms of the culture of the Black Americans in America. Outside of the Vietnam protests and all the other stuff, so if you look at the issue of the colonial masters' policies in Africa and in the West Indies, the Caribbean, and then you look at what was also going on in America at that time, they were pretty much in sync. They were very much in sync. As a matter of fact, there was a guy called John Lynch, who was a slave owner in the Caribbean, who was invited to America to educate the slave owners of plantations in America in the South. If you want to Google it, go and Google John Lynch. And then you find out what he taught the American slave owners in the South. Because there was so much rebellion going on, and they wanted to know how to hold the slaves down. I'm saying? This was in the 1700s. So there was always a correlation of ideas in terms of holding the African and the slaves in America, in West Indies, in the Caribbean, as well as then you have the colonies in Africa. You know what I'm saying? So when these awareness movement, this civil rights movement, with blacks started standing up, and showing the pride that they have in themselves as human beings, it now started showing in the American media, where they started picking them apart. All right? So they create good cop, bad cop. Now, these are the evil ones and these are the good ones. So they pick on the groups. You have the Black Panther, then you had the groups in New York, where like the Muslim groups, where you have Malcolm X, and then you had the SRCC, Southern Methodist SMCC, led by a group which is Martin Luther King. So the Martin Luther King group pretty much was the one that was the mainstream view of most Americans at that time. Even though it was at that time, yet a lot of whites in America didn't like Martin Luther King. A lot of people will be surprised, but that's the fact. A lot of whites in America didn't like Martin Luther King because remember, these were the times where Black Americans were protesting, were standing up against a system that had segregation laws. I mean, these were state laws. You couldn't go here, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. You have to be in a certain position, So this was the time they were protesting these things. And at that time, a lot of whites also felt that by allowing blacks to assimilate into their culture, and based on the history that they have been taught and brought up with, they weren't ready for that. So anything involving civil rights, asking for same opportunities, they were not going to go for it. So that's why some people, Martin Luther King himself said that it doesn't matter whether you are in the South or you are in the North. They are racists in the South and they are racists in the North. So let's not act like the people in the North were not the same as the people in the South. But when you move to the North and you start living within their communities and you find out, and that is what happened in Chicago. When he went there to protest against the housing laws and as well as economic opportunities for African Americans at that time. So when you have all these things, and then you look at a country like Ghana, Africa. I mean, I'm picking Ghana in particular. I'm going back to this thing about this hair. Then if you have the history, if you know the history, then you as an African American or as an African who have lived outside and come to understand the system, you will be very, very disappointed. You will be very, very disappointed when things like this happen. So it is very, very unfortunate, but that is what really happened.